Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling something absolutely massive. Literally, one of the most ambitious goals in all of fundamental physics. We are going to try and unify the hardware and the software of our universe. Because, for over a century now, our understanding of reality has been deeply, deeply fractured. We've got these brilliant theories that describe the stage we live on, and brilliant theories that describe the actors, but they completely refuse to speak the same language. So today, we're exploring a massive paradigm shift that finally brings them together by combining unified dynamics, or UD, with relational quantum dynamics, or RQD.
But before we get into the weeds, I want to start by challenging your most basic assumption about the physical world. Just take a second and look around the room you're sitting in right now. Look at your hands. Is this reality a solid, physical place, or is everything you perceive merely an exchange of structural information happening on a deeper, completely invisible substrate? I know, it sounds a bit like science fiction, but as you'll see, the physics actually points to the latter.
Now, don't worry if that sounds a bit heavy. We're going to treat this explainer like a logical boot sequence. We'll start with the problem with reality, move into RQD as the software, then UD as the hardware, explore the grand synthesis of both, and finally wrap up with the classical illusion.
All right, booting up Section 1, the problem with reality and the missing link. We really need to define the delta here, that massive, glaring gap in our current understanding of physics.
Basically, our historical failure looks like this giant, uncrossable divide. On one side, you have general relativity and quantum mechanics. And hey, these frameworks are incredibly successful. They give us the metrics of reality, the math, the forces, the mass, the curvature of spacetime, the whole shebang. But on the other side of the canyon, we have the conscious observer. The observer is what provides the context, the measurement, and the actual lived experience of reality. The problem? These two sides absolutely do not talk to each other. We have the metrics and we have the perspective, but we have exactly zero unified framework for how a physical system actually generates an observer's perspective.
And that is exactly where our first framework steps in. Section 2, RQD, the software. This is what we call an informational ontology.
Think of RQD as the informational software of the universe. It's this brilliant interpretive idea that says relations and information form the actual bedrock of reality, not isolated physical objects. But to make it work, we need a strict definition of what an observer actually is. RQD borrows a concept called integrated information, which is usually denoted by the Greek letter phi. Phi just measures how strongly a system's parts are unified. So, in RQD, an observer isn't, well, actually, scratch the idea of a human in a lab coat. An observer is simply any complex, highly integrated bundle of information, a node of data where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
RQD elegantly explains reality through these 5 pillars. First, quantum states are contextual. They only exist relative to an observer. Second, time is modular. There's no giant master clock ticking away in the universe. Third, space itself is built from patterns of quantum entanglement. Fourth, observers emerge through that integrated information, or phi, that we just talked about. And fifth, our classical reality appears through decoherence. It's a beautiful, interconnected philosophy of information, but, and here's the kicker, RQD has one fatal flaw. It philosophically argues that reality is a web of information, but it completely lacks the physical mechanism to actually process this data. It's literally software without a computer. Enter the computer, Section 3, UD, the hardware, driven by a simplicial substrate.
If RQD is our software, unified dynamics, or UD, is the rigid physical hardware that space is actually built upon, and it is ruthless. It completely abandons the idea of a continuous empty space-time vacuum. Instead, UD replaces empty space with a pre-metric tetrahedral state machine. Picture reality as a massive, discrete network of tiny tetrahedrons, called K-foregraphs. At this basement level of reality, there is no physical dimension, no length, no mass, just combinatorial adjacency and a strictly governed sequence of state updates. UD operates on carrier viability selection, algorithmically pruning unviable structural branches to ruthlessly optimize its data capacity. And when information flows through this network, it creates processing burden, or BV. This is the accumulation of unresolved computational debt at a specific discrete node. So space isn't a void, it is heavily burdened with data.
Now here is the absolute magic number, the fundamental speed limit of reality, 768. Because the network is made of these discrete tetrahedrons, there's a mathematically locked absolute maximum capacity that a single node can handle. No single vertex can hold more than exactly 768 of this processing burden. If a localized point hits this threshold, it chokes, And to prevent a cascading crash of reality itself, the network is algorithmically forced to push that data outward. So, how does it push the data out? Through a strictly alternating mechanical cycle called triadic co-boundary transport. When a node maxes out, it goes through this sort of breathing step sequence. First, asymmetric expansion. The burden is literally shoved outward across the three faces of the tetrahedron, which multiplies it by 4/3. Then, symmetric consolidation. The burden resolves onto a bipartite edge locking symmetrically with a multiplier of 3/2. Now, why does this matter? Because this forced, alternating migration of processing debt is the pure underlying mechanism for what you and I experience macroscopically as momentum, repulsive forces, and time. Motion is literally just the algorithm preventing a localized geometric collapse.
All right, we have arrived at the absolute core of this explainer. Section 4, the grand synthesis. Software meet hardware.
The crucial point to take away from this is the beautiful duality of these two frameworks when they finally lock together. UD resolves the metrics perfectly. It gives us the rigorous math, the discrete geometry, the exact limits. RQD resolves the perspective perfectly. It gives us the context, the observer, the relational experience. Simply put, RQD provides the what and the why, and UD supplies the exact rigorous how. We can actually formalize this grand synthesis using a locked canonical translation protocol. Let's map it out. In RQD software, we have a relational measurement, an exchange of info between systems. In UD's hardware, that measurement is literally the mutual topological routing, that triadic co-boundary transport happening between two capacity-limited structures. And the observer? RQD says an observer is a highly integrated node of data, or phi. UD maps this flawlessly. An observer is just a macroscopic, highly integrated knot of computational debt, or vertex state update density. To put that in perspective, you, sitting there right now, are quite literally a massive traffic jam of localized processing burden on a tetrahedral substrate.
Which brings us to our final section, the classical illusion, our emergent reality.
So, what happens when we zoom out and boot this combined system up? The ultimate verdict is just profound. When these capacity-limited structures, these macroscopic knots of debt we call observers, exchange data, they are forced to structurally align. This environment-induced alignment is a process of topological decoherence. It creates the intersubjective agreement, the shared, consistent illusion that you and I perceive as the solid classical world.
And this brilliantly illustrates the entire paradigm shift. What we perceive as a stable external world emerges from deeper quantum relations. Reality is relational and informational. It's not made of independent physical stuff just sitting around in an empty void. It is an intricate cosmic conversation of information strictly governed by the capacity limits of a discrete tetrahedral network. The classical world is just the emergent shadow of this deeper, relentless calculation.
So I want to leave you with this final, lingering thought. The next time you look around the room or look in the mirror, really ask yourself, are you simply a passive entity observing a physical universe? Or are you, at the most fundamental, foundational level, just a macroscopic, highly integrated knot of structural data, constantly exchanging computational debt with the network around you? It kind of completely shatters the classical illusion, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the substrate of your reality.